Hey monsters! Thanks for tuning in to Murder Murder News, the true crime cult for the latest breaking news, murdery memes, TV reviews, podcast recommendations, and all things spooky. We really want to start this cult, so if you happen to know somebody or if you have some land you would like to donate, we will provide the baby goats plus all the murder talk. I'm television's Aurora Katie.
And I'm your favorite Canadian crime fan, Angelina Vilsash. This is the Week in True Crime.
Murder News.
This week, charges have been brought against the suspect in a February stabbing in Toronto. The 17-year-old is believed to have attacked 3 people at the Crown Spa massage parlor in what police now believe was an Incel terrorist attack. Ashley Noel Arzaga was pronounced dead at the scene, and a man and woman were both wounded but survived the attack. Police have stated that this was inspired by the ideologically motivated violent extremist movement commonly known as Incel, and as a result, federal and provincial attorney generals have consented to bring terrorism proceedings against the suspect. This marks the first time a terrorism charge has been tied to incels, a term that refers to self-described involuntary celibates. There are many online incel groups that explicitly encourage attacks against women, and many of these groups reference Elliot Rodger, who carried out a mass shooting outside a sorority house in Isla Vista, California in 2014.
It's such a weird little subculture that's popped up, and last summer I was listening to a really great podcast called LA Not So Confidential, which is hosted by 2 forensic psychologists, and they sort of get into the psychology of incels, where it comes from, and also they kind of do some talk about like the FBI and how they're profiling and watching the groups now, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds awesome. It's really cool to see them use terrorism as a label for this finally, where it's clear that's what it is, but that's usually just been
it's usually like a racist thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is refreshing, but I don't know. It's weird to feel like maybe Toronto's like some kind of incel hotbed. I've heard a couple of crazy events like this. So
your hometown, that sucks.
Yeah.
The bodies of sisters Vanita Richardson and Trevenia Campbell were found under a bridge in Floyd County, Georgia last week. The sisters were found with bags over their heads and shotgun casings nearby. Vanita and Trevenia were last seen in Vanita's car hours before the road crews found their bodies. Police are still looking for her car, which was a 1997 Toyota Corolla. 2 men were arrested this week and charged with connection to the homicide, but charges for murder have not been filed at this time. Investigators are asking for anyone who might have information on the deaths of the 2 sisters to call the number below.
A Massachusetts doctor has been charged with the murder of his wife, Kathleen McLean. Urologist Ingolf Tuerk was already facing charges of months of abuse against Kathleen for strangling her and even cutting her with scissors. Kathleen had recently secured a restraining order against Tuerk not long before her murder. Tuerk has allegedly confessed to strangling Kathleen to death and dumping her body in a nearby pond. Tuerk was arraigned on murder charges in court on Monday.
Each week, we'll try to introduce you to a podcast that might be new for you. This week's favorite podcast is Bruh, Issa Murder. Let's take a look.
We are so excited to have Andre with us from this week's favorite podcast, Bruh, Issa Murder. Andre covers true crime cases of color and features music from artists you probably haven't heard of before. Andre, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Hey, I am doing my best.
So where are you right now, and how is the quarantine going where you are?
So I was deployed and I got off deployment right when the quarantine hit. So I couldn't even come home and like enjoy the bars and going back out. I was just stuck back at my parents' house quarantine. So
You're
that's just my
kidding!
luck. The worst luck.
Where were you deployed?
I was in Qatar for like a year and a half. It was like right near Iran. We got out like as soon as all that crazy stuff started happening. So we were like, oh, we're lucky. Then no, COVID-19.
Yeah, and then like the whole world is falling to shambles.
Yeah. It's been a hell of a 2 years.
Oh my God. So I have to ask, because there's been times during this quarantine that I've sort of like fantasized about being at my parents' house. like this, like, ooh, like I would love it. Like I'm so depressed, I can't make a meal. Like I would love it if my mom was cooking for me and doing my laundry. And I'm 38, and I'm like, I want my mom
You're
to
still
take care of
fantasizing.
me. Yes. Like, how is it actually being at your parents'?
So when I got home, I already knew, like, I had an apartment. I was like, I'm gonna go back home, go to school full time, and just like save my money. So I bought like a $5,000 big RV and just parked it out behind my parents' house. And it's completely tricked it out. So yeah, I'm home with my parents, but I'm still like I have my own place, which is perfect because my dad's loud and listens to nothing but like 80s rock all the time. So
That's so cute. And then you have your own personal space for when you need
yeah,
quiet time to record or
Wusa.
just get away. Yeah. And then you can also go like hang out with your
Yeah,
family.
we go inside and we just BS sometimes. But then I'm like, you know what? The rock's coming on. I don't feel listening to Aerosmith. Gonna go outside.
Oh no, it's Aerosmith.
He loves Aerosmith.
Oh, that is really bad. I was trying to think because I was like, I like some 80s music, but I like more like synthy, like Britpop. And in
No,
my
he
mind,
loves
I
like
was like,
hair
that sounds
metal
fine.
and glam
But
rock. I can't.
not Aerosmith. God, no. Well, Andre, what inspired you to start your podcast?
So when I was younger, I had lost a member of my family, and I noticed that like I lived in Philadelphia, so my family always would, like email Fox 29 to try to like because it was never solved. So they emailed these different news stations to like get it covered, and it never got picked up. And that got me into being into true crime. And then the more I watched and listened to, I kept noticing I wasn't really hearing people who looked like me or getting my point of view, my perspective. So I was like, you know what? I need a vent. I'm just gonna do my own show and just help get it all out there because it's cathartic for me too to like just scream into a microphone about it.
That's right. And it's like a good thing that you're doing because if you're feeling that way and you're feeling like you're not represented by the media, so many others are feeling the same way. So
Yeah,
like what an amazing service you're offering while working out in your own
well, frustration.
past too. Yeah, like that's fantastic. That's really good inspiration. And I'm assuming that's maybe part of your true crime origin, having a death in your family like that. Is that what got you into true crime? Was there any other pieces that sort of connected it for you?
So it was that incident, and I was like 10 when I got into that, and I started out watching like ID Discovery and like Deadly Women and
Deadly
Oxygen Network.
Women.
Oh, I to this day I still love Deadly Women.
It's so cheesy and
It's so
wonderful.
extra. The
Yes.
costumes are great.
Yes. It's all
Especially like the
these like,
Pyramid Piece episodes.
ooh, I haven't seen that.
I love them, and it always like, and she killed him with arsenic, and the woman's like, ah.
So good. Well,
But
are
yeah,
there? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Mhm.
okay, so it was that incident, and then when I was like 15 or 16, I remember I was at my mom's place in Philly, and a woman came to my house. She was a journalist, and asked me about like, she said, "Oh, there's a body found like in the parking lot across the street a couple days ago. You didn't hear about it?" I was like, "No, I didn't hear about it." Tell me more. And I invited her inside, and she would just tell me about this homeless guy who died across the street. And I was like, "This is crazy but interesting."
It's interesting because I personally haven't been affected by like I've never known anybody who was killed. I've never had any like personal connections really. And there's like times when I'm like, oh, like you think to yourself for a second, like, I want a cool story, but then when you actually like think through what that means,
Oh
like
yeah.
I guess I should feel really grateful that I don't have any personal connections to murder. I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous.
And I always like wonder like if that didn't happen, would I still be
Right.
as invested in true crime as I am? And it's like, guess we'll really never know.
Yeah, you'll never know, but it's like, fortunately, the average person will never know somebody who
Yeah.
has been murdered, but yet there's millions of us that are fascinated by it. Like whether we're interested because I think a lot of people like solving the puzzle nature of it, like the
Yep.
mystery. And then
Like
there's
if
so
you
many.
played Clue as a kid, you're into true
Yeah,
crime now.
exactly. Exactly.
It's
Like
that.
if you enjoyed that element of getting to pretend to be a detective, like you're a good candidate for true crime.
Yeah.
And are there any true crime cases right now? Any big breaking cases you've been following tirelessly in the news?
Well, there's obviously the recent shootings that have been happening, like Sean Reed and Ahmad, and there's another woman. But I'm still obsessing over this one case that I covered a couple of weeks ago that I'm still like It's called Charlie Chop Off. And imagine like Candyman, but he only targeted Black and brown children.
Oh.
And it's such an insane case, and they still don't think they got the right guy because he was like an escaped mental patient, and it could be him, but it could be someone completely different. It's insane, and it still keeps me up at night because I just want to figure out who did it.
So how recent is this case? I haven't heard of this one.
So it happened in like the 80s and 90s, but then there was a couple of like copycat killings, and they don't know if those were just copycats or the person was still like out there doing this, because his whole MO, and it's gonna be a little graphic, so content warning. He would target children, like little boys, and then he would kill them and then like cut off their penises, and he would place their bodies on rooftops. That was his whole thing. Like everybody was always found on a rooftop, and
why
then like,
on a rooftop?
don't
I mean,
know
why any of it? But like, but
like,
why a rooftop?
Don't know. And the process is always just like he'll like lure him away with like candy or something like that, cut off the penis and throw him on a rooftop. And like the only reason he got like caught is because one boy he thought he killed survived. And he was able to like tell him like everything what happened, and then they started linking other cases together. And it was just it's a while.
And so was he able to identify him as the killer?
He was, but at the same time, that person wasn't able to be linked up. They found a person who better matched where the bodies were found and like times of being out, because that person was in a mental institution, but like getting out for like, you know, they let people out to go do stuff. And his timeline better matched up to the killings. But then people are like, but what if that kid was right? Because he did see.
Yeah. And I imagine that's tough because like people in general do not make good witnesses. Like our memories are so fallible. Like if
especially
I ever had
after
to
like
be
a traumatic event.
Yes. Like if I ever had to be a witness for anything, like if I had to like describe my own facial features to you right now, like I don't know what I look like.
I'm going in blind.
Yeah. Yes. But like then like a kid too, like going through trauma, trying to identify this person who did such terrible things to you, like
yeah, and you can see why it could easily be muddled up because
yeah,
it's like a boogeyman at that point.
Yeah, like was there any like physical evidence? I know the 80s they didn't, of course, have DNA and that sort of thing, but like was there any physical evidence tying him to the crime?
The only physical evidence they actually found were like the severed penises that were like left in like I think it was Grand Central Station Park. Because they found a group of kids actually playing with one of it, not realizing what it was, and it was
my god,
yeah, and that's just traumatizing a whole nother group of kids.
Yes.
So most of the evidence was more like speculation, but they felt like they really got the right guy, and at one point it got crazy. They had to protect him because like the people in New York found out that this is the suspect, and they went down to the police station with a mob trying to like get the guy. So there's a whole point where the police had to stand off with the mob saying like, no, don't storm the police station to murder him, and they had like sneak him out the back. Like it was crazy.
Right. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to listen
great
to that
movie.
episode. Yeah, it would be like a really, really dark movie, but
I'd
really,
watch it.
and yeah, I would absolutely. I'm not saying I would not watch it. But like,
let's get like Jordan Peele on it.
Yes, he would be the perfect person because it's almost like too on the nose, you know,
it's
like
too
making
crazy
a
to
statement, like by cutting off their penises, like it almost is like it sounds like the things of horror movies. Like it would be the perfect thing for Jordan Peele. Pay attention.
To tackle it.
We've got your next film for you.
It's written itself. You gotta put it together.
All right, get Andre on it too.
Hit me on the hip, you know. My page is always on.
Right. Well, Andre, please let our listeners know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, so Instagram, MurderMurder, Twitter, MurderBruh, Facebook, MurderMurder. I got the best memes. Just follow me up.
They are my favorite. Like, that's actually because we're both on Instagram, and it's definitely my favorite social media. I'm on it all day. Like, if you're interacting with us on Instagram, it's probably me because I'm like commenting on everything, whatever.
I love Instagram.
And yours has caught my attention so many times because you make your own memes sometimes, and I know I regram them. They're so good.
I try. We laugh through the pain. Everyone, we all laugh through it together.
Yes.
And then also I'm going to be on Get Vocal. It's like a live streaming platform. Like it's like Twitch kind of a podcaster. So starting the 28th every Thursday, you get to hang out with me and talk about weird crimes in the news.
That's so fun that I will definitely tune into that. And all of y'all make sure that you check out Bros and Murder wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode.
This week, we're watching McMillions on HBO. McMillions tells the story of the McDonald's Monopoly game scam during the 1990s. During this time, there were almost no legitimate million-dollar winners in the contest. The documentary interviews the FBI agents and authorities who investigated the game heist, as well as the fake winners. I also highly recommend watching this show and then supplementing your watch with a listen to Let's Talk About True Crime with last week's guest, Esther Ludlow. Esther and Jerry Williams, a retired FBI agent, discuss the show and add some super interesting insight. So that marks another fascinating McDonald's case, and everyone they get away with, and they all fly under the radar somehow. I don't know if you also watched the one about the coffee scandal.
I have not seen a documentary about the coffee thing, but I think that case is so interesting because I feel like we were sort of led to believe at the time that she was kind of exaggerating the damage of what happened, but it caused, like, she was hospitalized, it caused severe burns. Is that right?
Yeah, it was absolutely terrible. It was like she almost died. It was an old lady. It was really terrible. But like McDonald's manipulated the media coverage and made it sound that she was mockable. And I feel like they're so good at doing that. That's why they get away with things like this. It's like, I didn't even realize this Monopoly scam was a thing.
I had no idea.
I guess they let that one fly as well somehow.
Yeah,
so.
like how did it go on for so long, for so many years, and we're just finding out about it?
Yeah, real interesting.
Well, we have another special guest with us this week to tell us his personal connection to a hometown murder. Let's take a look.
We are so excited to have Chris Machado here from Fomocast. Chris and I met years ago in a group for Disneyland social clubs, which I'm not sure if any of you really know what that is. I don't know how we found ourselves in this circle, but I used to go to Disneyland pretty much weekly, dressed in a jean jacket vest, sporting my Disneyland patch. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, it was once a month coming from Northern California down to Disneyland. So sporting the patch, meeting other people.
So it's a funny thing, and I don't exactly know how it got started or how I found out about it, but I joined one called the Star Tourists. And basically we would just walk around Disneyland drinking and meet up with groups of other social groups and hang out and talk about Disney stuff. Was that pretty much how it went for you?
Yeah, I was. We were going, just a small group of us, and we wanted to make some more friends. And since we are in Northern California, we can't go as often. So we made some friends, started going more often, and then we would just relax and take pictures of people. We liked doing that. That was our favorite thing to do, was taking pictures for bigger families and whatnot. And like everyone says in the social club community, spreading the magic is what we like to do.
That's right. And there were occasionally ride takeovers too, where everybody was going to go on Tower of Terror. Everybody meet at 2:00 at the Tower of Terror to go on the ride together.
Yep. And then also when the Mad Tea Party was there, that's how I got kind of deeper into it, was everyone meeting up for the Mad Tea Party.
Those were the absolute best times of my life. I had so much fun hanging out at Disneyland. I'm not in LA right now. I'm in Montreal, and my husband works in film, so we just sort of go wherever the project he's working on takes us. But we keep hoping that the project will take us back to LA, because I miss my annual pass. I miss my social clubs. And it's interesting to me that the Venn diagram of people who love Disney and who love murder is like this. There's so many of us.
Well, and you also got to think the murders type. In order to be into it, you have to have a certain kind of personality to separate the reality of it with the interestingness of it, I guess you would say. Because
Right.
I mean, if you're too focused on what actually happened, then you're just going to be sad that there was a murder. But a lot of the stuff I know you guys talk about is stuff that's not only murderous, but kind of shocking in what happens and the information you do get out of it.
Yeah. So, Chris, we spoke recently on Facebook, and you said that you have a very interesting hometown murder for us today, and I'm so excited to hear it. Why don't you tell us all about it?
So it's kind of interesting. I know some of the people involved, so I don't really talk too much about it because it was kind of a weird situation. There was an individual. If you search it, his name's Corey Kaufman, and he went missing in 2012. People were suspecting foul play. He didn't hang out with the best crowd. Was known to be kind of like a petty thief. Stealing stuff from people's scrap yards and whatnot. Um, and so he went missing. No one saw him for a long, long time. And then we have a forest by us. I believe it's the Stanislaus National Forest. And two hunters came across a decomposing body in there. And it was about, I think it was like 14 months after the fact.
Oh my God.
So everything seemed kind of, oh, hey, look, they don't know what happened, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually things just start going crazy. All these people started getting implicated. Um, the story goes that him and another individual were planning to rob a local attorney, defense attorney, and that they were going to go to he has like a scrapyard full of like antique car parts and things that are probably some of it's garbage, some of it's valuable.
Mhm.
And the investigation says that he was killed. They don't know by who. They didn't say by who or anything. That he was killed in the attempt to do that, and that his body was moved to a liquor store and that he was buried in the back of a liquor store in this dirt area, and that eventually he was actually dug up and moved to the Stanislaus National Forest. Um, During this whole investigation, yeah, exactly. They didn't elaborate, how they knew this, and then eventually it comes out that one of the people that supposedly worked for the liquor store saw this happen. And as I told you before we recorded, I got to see all the police records because I worked for a news organization at the time, which they were readily available and not anything secretive. But you would read it, and it was like half of it was like, oh my gosh, and half of it was kind of like, well, I get it. So that guy ratted out supposedly on a bunch of people, and you're like, okay, he's trying to get out of jail, whatnot. Um, so mind you, this was 2013, and towards the beginning of 2014, this big report comes out and it implicates the defense attorney, his wife, his daughter, three CHP officers, and the owners of that liquor store.
Like they
And
were all in on it?
they were saying that they were all in on it. So I was kind of like, man, that's a lot of stuff going on there. I go, how did they all get involved? This is weird. Well, what ends up happening is they say, well, the liquor store guys, one of their vehicles was burned to pieces, you know, close to where the body was found. And that the guy who ratted everyone out said, well, they told me to take the truck up there with them, and then we ended up burning it because they didn't want any evidence of a body being in the back of the truck, whatever. And then you're like, oh my gosh. And I go, well, okay, I get what, and that was the liquor store they were supposedly buried behind of. And the crazy part is they're filing all these charges, but they can't prove anything. The cadaver dogs don't pick up on anything behind the liquor store.
Mhm.
They just noticed that some stuff has been moved. So I'm like, okay, you got your people. Well, then they released the information about the CHP officers, and I'm like, how did the CHP officers get involved? And you look at the evidence, and one of them was a little more, they have phone evidence of him sending out a text message saying that that person who was robbing needed to be quote unquote taken care of. And I was like, okay, well, that could mean anything. And then they have phone conversations saying basically whenever the cops were going to respond to the liquor store, they were warned beforehand about it. And it just started getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and the story just kept getting crazier about what was going on with the family of the guy who was killed. Demanding answers, saying, this is not, really upset. Sadly, I believe one of his relatives, his dad or his mom, just passed away recently. Um, but the craziest part about the whole case is if you know anything about crime, and obviously you guys researched your stuff, there's needs to be a certain amount of evidence, because if you try and go to trial or do anything before anything's there, everything's going to just get thrown out.
Right.
So as time started going on, you would see, okay, well, now this person's not in the case anymore for whatever reason. So first it was one CHP officer was dismissed from the case. Then it was the daughter and the wife. So all you had left was 2 of the CHP officers, the lawyer, and the 2 owners of the liquor store. And mind you, my family, we have a dairy, we farm. So when I'm not working, I'm helping them. And one of the liquor stores is down the road from our dairy. So I knew the guys pretty decently. I would go in there every so often, get something to drink, whatever. And you could tell it felt, I wouldn't say cocky, but you can feel about the air that nothing was going to happen to any of these people. And the only person in jail was the person who supposedly cut a deal and ratted everybody out. And last year, July 2019, every single person was dismissed from the case. Everything.
Wow.
Everybody was acquitted. The owners of the liquor store, the attorney, which he was a defense attorney, so I was kind of like, I mean, he probably can get himself out of it. There's no proof of anything, no trace, but it was the longest trial in basically in our county's history, and it has never been solved. No one said anything. And the worst part is I think one of the key witnesses, aside from the guy who ratted everyone out, was the guy's friend who was supposedly going to go rob the place with him. And the defense attorneys, I don't know where they get their evidence. I don't know who they talked to, but they basically ripped this guy to shreds and saying, well, didn't you threaten to kill him too? And so they had evidence of the guy's friend threatening to kill him. So there was in the end, I think 15 to 20 people involved. One of the liquor stores in the
Wow.
back, yeah, the liquor store has a back room in it where cops would go play poker. Like the liquor store owners were great friends with people, and they would let them come in there and play poker in a private room. Well, apparently there was a bunch of guns in there that were registered to cops, and it was just
All
it changed a
kinds
lot
of
of stuff.
underhanded stuff. Wow.
Lots of underhanded stuff. And the craziest part is, I believe all 3 CHP officers who were charged, they lost their jobs because, I mean, when you think about it, once this goes in there, even if you're not, you know how everything's going on, everything in the world, you get accused of anything, and you get acquitted or proof comes out you didn't do it, it still ruins your image. And
Right.
so every single one of them got paid out by the CHP as well. So the California Highway Patrol paid 3 people out, and I was just kind of like, what's the next step? So you don't know. And this happened, I believe the last of it, beginning of this year, was when the last 2 people were dismissed. And last year was the majority of them. And it's shocking to me because he was obviously murdered. Like, it was no doubt about it. If you find a
Like he
decomposing
did
body in
not
the
end
spot
up
rain,
in that woods because he crawled out there. Like clearly something happened.
exactly. And my area where I live at, we're the meth capital of the world, so we have a lot of undesirable people doing undesirable stuff. But I don't believe you deserve to die for anything like that.
And do
So
you think, like,
it's been
do you speculate that that's, I know this is speculation, that that's what the cover up was? Do you think it was a drugs thing? Was it an arms thing?
so I think what more than likely happened was, I think, 'cause when I read the reports, it sounded more like the CHP. It would be like, let's say, for instance, I was an officer and you had someone harassing you, a police officer or someone, and you called me knowing that I was an officer, and you asked me, what would you do in this situation? And I said, I would demand a warrant. I would do the blah, blah, blah. I would do. And they were kind of going after a couple of the guys for that. And I'm like, well, if I'm friends with a liquor store owner who's accused of something and I'm just his friend and I don't know the whole extent of it, I'm going to offer him advice because he's my
Right.
friend. I'm not. So that was some of it. But the belief was that Mr. Kaufman was caught multiple times stealing from this attorney, and that he basically paid someone to take care of it. And he's a very intelligent attorney, and I know for a fact that he could probably basically do one of those things where, if I said, hey, take care of this problem, I meant to make sure to put some cameras up or put some barbed wire up. He's smart enough to where you don't say, take care of this, kill the guy kind of thing. So I think he told someone to take care of him. Someone did in that area of that facility kind of thing. And they just can't prove who did it because you only have one person who is saying that these people did it. And he's changed his stories multiple times. So, um, it's all about the timeline now. I don't know if I know that they've been acquitted, the majority of them, and then a couple of them were dropped. And so I don't know about the legal aspect of anything unless there's new evidence that comes up. But this was 2013 that they found the body, so that's 7 years. what more can anyone do? And
It
so,
seems like
um,
it's been so long and there's so much corruption that he's never really going to get justice. Like there's too many high up people trying to protect this.
it's a lot of that, and I also think, I mean, it's a sad fact that when someone hears about a drug addict getting killed while robbing somebody, it kind of just people just go, "Hey, it is what it is," rather than well, why did it happen? Because people said he was clean, people said he was getting his life back on track. Um, and especially in the current times where we've seen lots of videos of unarmed people being shot for no apparent reason, no matter how bad of a crime they committed. um, Vigilantism isn't the way to go.
Not
So
okay.
it kind of it tarnished a lot of stuff, because when it came out, it was probably the biggest thing in the state, aside from maybe like in the southern California, when they have the like Rodney King issues and things like that. Other than that, I mean, most cop stuff gets covered up for the most part. If anything horrendous happens, with body cams now, it's different. But it shocked the community, because it was just kind of like, well, we trusted these people, and now they're implicated in this. And like I said, no matter what you did, whether you were involved or not, your implication is going to tarnish your image. So a lot of people were really untrustworthy of a lot of people for a long time after that. And then just seeing the smiles on some of the defendants, some people were like, well, are they happy they got off, or are they happy because they didn't get convicted, kind of thing? So
Yeah.
it's still, I believe the case is still open. They still look for leads and whatnot. But like you said, after 7 years, I mean, I've seen some cold case stuff get solved. Like we had the Golden State Killer that got solved,
That's true.
but that was through ancestry DNA. And then now, I don't know if you know about this, but California is trying to change the law now on ancestry DNA stuff, because they're saying that's against the law for the police to submit DNA evidence. So it's
I have a
it's
feeling there
just
would
kind of
be backlash for how that evidence was going to work. Like obviously everybody in the world is happy that they were able to use DNA evidence, ancestry DNA evidence, to catch the Golden State Killer and some of these old timey serial killers from the 70s that really hurt a lot of people. But it just seems like maybe eventually we'll get to a point where that power is being overstretched. So I assume there would be backlash on the legality of that at some point. So we'll kind of see how it
mhm.
turns out. I would like for them to be able to keep using it for like big cases. Like this would be great instance where this guy's dead and there were many people involved. How great if they had DNA
Right.
evidence tied to it.
Well, and that's the problem is there's so many. If I watch like live PD and things like that on occasion, and when you get officers who truly want to do a good job, and you look at why they're upset about certain things, like with the submitting DNA to ancestry, because one misstep and everything's thrown out. You can't use any of it, even though you can prove the person is who they are. With the Golden State Killer instance, they got the match and then contacted the person, and the person didn't know what it was about. I don't believe that they indicated that they were calling her because of the DNA match. They were just calling as they were police officers. So there's
I
so
hadn't
many
heard
little
about
things.
that.
And yeah, so the rumor was that basically they submitted the DNA to ancestry, and I guess that's, first of all, that's against protocol. If evidence you can't prove, kind of thing. And then yeah, they contacted the match prematurely, or they did something that was kind of nefarious that people like the defense felt was not fair. But I mean, that's the problem with my town right here that we live in. We're smallish. We only have, I think, about 80,000 people now, maybe. And our police department just had their first upgrade of their radio equipment in like 25, 30 years.
Wow.
So they're very limited on their investigations to begin with, and that's usually, they just pass it on to the sheriff department, because they're like, we don't have the ability to do that. And especially with what's going on now, they don't have the money to hire people. They got rid of our gang task force. They rely solely on donations, and for a lot of upgrades. And that's why I think a lot of these stuff, they fall through the crack. And
Right.
the Corey Coffin one was kind of the biggest one, just because how many agencies had to get involved, how many people were involved, how many well-known people were involved. Especially with social media, everyone gets heated because someone gets killed, they were my best friend. You didn't know the bad things they were doing, so they're always going to be your good best friend. But I mean, it's the world we live in. You have to take everything with a grain of salt. And luckily for me, I got to read all the paperwork. It was like 80 pages. It took me like a day and a half to read everything. And
That's a dream come true.
it's kind of cool because you could see literally every single aspect of the case. And while you're reading it, it was almost like reading. It was like I think for me it was like when I read like when I was younger and I read books that I was really, really looking forward to, or I saw the movie, and it was just like a next turn. You turn the page and it was like, oh my gosh, wait, what? And then you're reading what was said, and because like I said, newspapers, they just they paraphrase everything. You don't see the actual details, and the details that I read were it was kind of shocking because you get the autopsy report, you get the stuff that they've recorded that they don't release. The newspapers don't find it interesting. But as a true crime person, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can interpret this one sentence in 7 different ways of what they were saying. Could be innocent, could be nefarious, could be just a slip of the tongue. They could be code. I mean, you're just trying to figure out what the whole thing is. It's phenomenal. That's why I enjoy true crime so much, is because most of these cases, people say, well, I heard them say this. Well, what do they mean by that? Unless it's a blatant, I'm going to kill you, what do they actually mean by what they just said?
So true. Well, Chris, it's been so great having you here. Please let our viewers know where they can find Fomocast on social media.
If you go to Facebook and search Fomocast, we have a Facebook group that's pretty active with quarantine type stuff, since there's not real, we're an entertainment podcast. So we're kind of not struggling, but everyone's just kind of catching up on Netflix, Hulu TV shows. So if you go there and just search for us, we post everything. We're on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Spotify. And we cover true crime things from time to time, but mostly it's just about entertainment, new TV shows, new movies, and every once in a while we'll go into gaming. And right now we pretty much don't have anything because I think the only thing that's come out new is the Scooby-Doo movie, and that's pretty much Friday on demand because there's nothing open, and
hey, that's a little too crimey,
Yeah, it is. Hey, Scooby-Doo, the original true crime. I mean,
that's right.
I grew up watching that. It was a lot of fun.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
We love getting to hear your feedback, and we want to thank Aisha Vander for commenting that she just recently discovered the Ted Bundy tapes on Netflix, but she wants to check out the Amazon Prime series next. We are definitely recommending checking out Falling for a Killer because it does such a good job of focusing on the survivors and the victims' families.
XO Sharon Noel loved all the podcast recommendations mentioned by Esther Ludlow because she likes to listen to true crime podcasts while she works on spreadsheets at work.
Thanks so much for tuning in to This Week in True Crime with Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
If you need more of a true crime fix, join our commune at MurderMurder.news for a monster book club and cold case solving groups. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. See you next week.
Murder News.